we're just working it back and forth like that, pushing down. You can sort of feel it turning underneath your hand. Stretch the outer skin, pulling the sides down. Take it out of the pan so that the air can get at it, the actual texture. All right. Nice, soft, springy. Is there anything better than a fresh homemade dinner roll? Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I'm making dinner rolls. We're having chili tonight. My kids said they want dinner rolls, so I'm making dinner rolls, and I'm going to show you how to make nice, soft, easy dinner rolls. So let's get started. All you need for this recipe is flour, water, salt, yeast, and an egg, and a little bit of oil or butter, if you can use butter. I'm one of these dairy-free people, can't have dairy, so I use other things other than butter. If I could use it, I would, because it's delicious. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is actually heat some water up with some flour in it. Let me show you here. Let's go over to the stove. All right, so I got a pan here on the oven. I'm going to put it on medium heat. I'm going to put cold water in the pan. All right. Now I'm going to add 1 heaping tablespoon of flour to that water. That's all. And just going to stir it in. You got to add this to the cold water because the flour won't mix with the water if it's hot. It'll just turn into a dumpling. So you got to sort of move quick because I've turned the thing up here. But just get it all stirred in while it's still cold, and it should make something resembling a milk. Okay, the reason we do this, there's a fancy name for this, but it doesn't really matter, this technique, is that by doing this, you're kind of processing the flour down by applying heat to it. And so this little bit of flour that we've added to the water is going to help the buns, the dough, become very soft and very fluffy, just by doing this little tiny step. And it doesn't take long if you have a nice flat pan like this. Let's turn it up even higher. More heat. And it shouldn't take long to get that boiling. Just take a couple minutes. Okay, so I'll come back when it's actually to a boil. Just going to keep moving it around a little bit. Should only take a minute or two. All right, so we're starting to boil here, so that's enough. All right, see how it's getting really thick, real fast? That's enough. Take it off the heat. All right, so that only took about a minute. All right, now let's go back to the pan. All right, so I've zoomed in a little bit there so you can see what's going on. So now I'm going to put all that really, it's almost like a gravy, right? So I'm going to throw that in the mixing bowl. All right. And add a cup of cold water. All right. Now we've got a cup of cold and we've got a cup of warm. Now just mix that together. They should mix really easily. Okay. Now we know that this is lukewarm, right? It's just an easy way to do it. You've got equal parts water that's been brought to a boil and just cold tap water. It's about lukewarm to the touch, right? Just the right temperature. Now we're going to throw in an egg. All right, just 1 egg. Hope we don't get any shell in there. Stab the egg yolk, just mix that in. We're adding an egg because it makes everything richer, right? Just adds richness to the dough. Now we're going to add a heaping teaspoon of salt and a good tablespoon of sugar. You can use honey for this. You can use really anything you want, but just plain old white sugar is just fine. I'm trying to keep this really simple. All right, so we got salt, sugar, egg, water, and flour. Now we're going to add a tablespoon of vegetable oil. Right here, you'd want to put a big hunk of butter in here. A nice tablespoon or more of butter. Really softened butter, right? If you can use butter. Okay, so now we got this sort of mixture. Okay. Okay, now we're going to start to add flour. Notice we haven't added any yeast yet. We will. We'll get there. I'm trying to add as much things to the mixture to just temper down, absorb, take some of the heat out of the mixture, right? This flour is at room temperature, so it's going to cool what's in the bowl, right? So 'cause the main concern is that if it's too hot, when you add the yeast, you can kill your yeast. You don't want to do that, right? So I've just added a cup of flour. This recipe is going to need about 3 cups of flour, maybe a little more. We'll just see where it goes. On any given day, the humidity is different depending on the kind of, if a bread recipe says use X amount of flour, it's never precise. It's a feeling. The dough has a feeling to it. When an amount of flour is recommended, that's a ballpark. It's not a precise amount. It'll never work out. Rarely will it work out. Okay, so now we've added everything and I'm going to put the yeast in. So for yeast, I've got a variety here, instant yeast. Any sort of instant yeast will do. I'm going to use just a heaping teaspoon of this. All right. Now a lot of recipes, they tell you to wake the yeast up and all that sort of stuff. If you have yeast that's been sitting around for years and you don't know if it's viable, that's probably a good idea to put the yeast in some of the water with some sugar and wait for it to fizz up. If you make bread all the time like I do, you don't need to do that ridiculous step. You can add the yeast while you're making the bread while it's still reasonably liquid like this is here. Right? This is fine stage to add the yeast. I'm 100% confident that this will rise and it'll work out just fine. Okay, just 1 heaping teaspoon of yeast, all it's needed, all right? I'll put that away, put that back in the freezer. All right, now I'm gonna continue to add my flour. So another cup, this is cup number 2 of flour. Notice I'm just using a fork here, not using an electric mixer or any of that gear. I find it so irritating on cooking shows where they just have so much stuff. And I mean, sure, it's great, but it's, often if someone's watching a YouTube video on how to make bread, it's maybe their first time. So they probably don't have all that gear. They probably just have like, a spoon, a fork or something like that. So I like to do things that way. And this is the way I make it. I don't have a bread maker. I don't have a mixing system. All right, so this is cup number 3. Okay, now with this cup, I think it should start to, So we're starting to get to the point where, we've got the right amount of flour for all the liquid things in this mixture. The cup of hot, the cup of cold, and the egg, which, egg, we call eggs protein, but the egg is more water than anything else. Water with some protein and some fat, but mostly water. Now this is still, in my mind, a bit wet. It should come away from the bowl. This is not doing that, so I'm going to add just a touch more flour. Maybe a third of a cup, quarter cup, third of a cup. All right, at this stage, I add the flour in little bits. What I'm looking for is for this ball to cling to itself, right? Not there yet. Add a little bit more. You want to have the moisture level of the dough just right, right? If it's too dry, the bread won't be soft and fluffy. And if it's too wet, it'll be almost impossible to manage. And mind you as well, you can stop a bit short of it being perfectly, a ball if you want an extra wet dough. But anyway, I'm going to add a little bit more. So we're coming up on about 3.5 cups of flour. It might get to 4, right? It's really when this ball sticks to the fork and stops, it wants to be like one thing. We're almost there, so I'm just going to add another little bit, like 2 tablespoons, really. I think we're pretty much there. So we've added almost 4 cups of flour, but not quite. All right? I think that's close enough. Okay, so now we've done all the work we need to do with the flour at this stage. Okay, so what we want to do, I'm just going to put a little bit of oil around the side of the bowl here. This recipe has 2 tablespoons of oil in it, really. 1 when you're mixing and 1 to just keep it from sticking. Okay, so I got that there. I'm going to get a going to stick a pot lid on here. I watch so many shows where they use plastic. Why? When you can just use a pot lid, right? Or a wet rag. Why? The pot lid does a better job, right? You want a nice, moist environment. And also, if you want it to stay nice and warm, right, just stick some tea towels over it to hold the heat in, just like putting a sweater on it, right? Put a couple of these on and leave it for about an hour. You can even leave it for longer. It doesn't have to be an hour. It can be an hour and a half. It can be 2 hours. All right? So we'll see in about an hour. All right, so it's been a couple hours now. I meant to get back to it in an hour, but it's been 2 hours. That's totally fine. Actually, you know, a little longer is better in lots of ways. Just helps the dough get that much more softened up. So that's how full we are now. It's at least doubled in size. All right, so now we can do some kneading and some preparation of the dough. All right, so let's get some flour on the counter here. All right, get this out. A little bit, still a little bit, what do we got here? For a spatula or something here. Still a little bit wet. We can definitely work a little bit more flour into the dough. All right, and that's totally fine, totally workable. All right, let's just put that aside. Get a little more flour going here. Just take off the old wedding ring. Don't want to get flour underneath the wedding ring. It's handy to have one of these thingies, but it's not absolutely necessary. Any sort of egg flipper will do, really, right? It's just a dough thing. You don't need this. Right? All right, so I'm going to add a little bit more dough here. Keep your hands floured. Just move this around a bit. Right? What you want is enough flour worked into the dough that you can work with it without it sticking to your hands, right? So now we're going to knead this for a bit. That's all we're doing now, right? Right, so we keep working the dough into our hands as needed to keep things from sticking. We're just going like, you don't have to do anything fancy. There's all kinds of different ways to knead. But if you just put your hands on it and roll it back and forth like that, that'll do it. If it sticks to the counter, just loosen it up a bit, okay? Let me bring the camera in to show you what I'm doing here so you can see a bit closer. We're just working it back and forth like that, pushing down. You can sort of feel it turning underneath your hand, right? If it sticks, just get some more flour in your hands, right? And you need to do this for about a minute or two. Okay, if you want to count, you sort of go forward and back, right? Do that about 40, 50 times, which only takes about a minute. There's all kinds of different techniques for doing this. I notice a lot of people that make YouTube videos, their flour is very wet, and it sticks all over the counter, and it sticks to their hands, and it just doesn't. I mean, you want to get it. You want as much moisture in the dough as possible, but you don't want it sticking to your hands. That's totally annoying, right? And it just makes it difficult to work with it, right? So it's a careful balance. But I mean, just go by feel. If it's sticking to your hands, add a bit more flour. Okay, now what we got to do is divide this up into, enough to fill this pan. I got a pan here that's about, it's about 10 by 14. 9 by 12 would be fine too, right? So we got to divide this up into what's going to become rolls. And it's a question of judgment how big a pan you need, right? You get the pan too small, you don't have enough dough to fill the pan. And the pan's too big, they won't rise enough, right? So it's a question of your judgment. Cut this in half. Cut it in half again. Just going by eye. Cut each of these in half. All right. Sorry, I had to step away there, the phone rang. So I got 8 of these now, right? So I'm going to divide them again. So we'll have, in the end, 16. All right, just trying to get each of these evenly divided in half by eye. Doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so now I got 16 balls of dough. Right, I'm just going to take each of these. I'm going to roll it around like this in the flour. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, okay? Now they're all close to the same size, but not exactly. Right, anyway, I'm going to take each one and just toss around the flour a little bit, like that. Then let them rest for about 15 minutes, all right? So we'll see you in about 15 minutes. All right, so I've let these rest for about 15 minutes. Now it's time to give them one final good knead. And the trick with these is you got to sort of turn them over onto themselves to stretch the outer skin. Just plop them down like that. All right, so you just turn it over a few times. Keep your hands floured. All right, plop them down like that. All right, so you just get some flour in your hands. All right, and you just stretch the outer skin, pulling the sides down. Right, so you're kind of making a little puff out of it, right? All right, so they're all in the pan. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in the oven. The oven's going to be off. All right, so a lot of people just put saran wrap over this, but there's a lot better tricks for getting these to rise. I'm going to put them in the oven with the oven off. And underneath them on the lower rack, I'm going to put these sort of on the upper rack. On the lower rack, I'm going to put a pan of boiling water. I'm going to leave them like that for about 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Have a look. Waiting for them to, once they've risen, I'll take it from there, all right? So we'll see you when these have risen. They're going in the oven with some hot boiling water, and that'll give them a nice, moist, warm, moist, steamy environment for them to rise and stretch and, get nice and soft and big and fluffy. All right, so it's been about an hour, and these have risen really nicely, as you can see, right? So now it's time to turn the oven on. I'm going to turn it to 400. All right, and once I'll turn it to 400, I'll put them in when it comes up to temperature. We'll see in a minute. All right, so the oven's ready, 400. Going to stick them in, middle rack, and we'll leave them there for about 20 minutes, okay? So we'll see you in 20 minutes. We'll check them out. That's good. Nice and brown on top. Nice sound. Right, should sound hollow, just a touch. One more thing to do here. If you want them to have a nice shiny look, just get some butter. Of course I'm using this margarine stuff, but get some butter and a brush and just lightly go over the tops. Okay? To give them a nice flavor too, of course. Right? Do that while it's still nice and hot so it gets right in there. Also, like any bread, it should come out of the pan when you take it out of the oven, all right? So let me just move this over here. Right, so you should take it out of the pan. Let me just get something to grab that with. Should come right out. And again, you don't need parchment paper. You don't need anything special to do bread. Whew, that's hot. Let me see. Maybe I can just bang that, yeah. Come on, bread, let's go. There we go. All right, see, nothing stuck there. Right? You take it out of the pan, so, okay, so let's have a good look there, right? You take it out of the pan so that the air can get at it. If it's in the pan, it'll sweat, and the bread just won't properly breathe and air itself out. Okay, so by letting it sit like this, it'll, you know, just properly get the moisture out. A lot of people don't show you that step, all right? So I'm just gonna leave it like this until it's time to eat it for supper time. It probably tastes really good right now, but never a good idea. Everybody does it, but it's never a good idea to eat bread right out of the oven. So I'm gonna let this sit for about 30 minutes and then I'll try one, okay? We'll see you then. All right, so that's been close enough to half an hour. I mean, what do you want from me? I'm just a man. So let's break off one of the smaller ones here. See how she comes away? Very soft. Here, I'll pull this apart from the camera here, just so you can get a sense of, you know, how the actual texture, right? Nice, soft, springy, right? Perfect dinner roll. Now, I mean, if you're doing this, you can substitute. I mean, I used water. You can use milk instead of water in the recipe, or half milk, half water. You can do that sort of thing. That's all up to you. Certainly makes it that much richer if you use milk. All right, let's give her a taste here. Man, is there anything better than a fresh homemade dinner roll? That's a perfect dinner roll. Anyway, that's how you do it. Not hard to do. A couple little steps there, but every little, I mean, the boiling the water with the a bit of flour in it, that just adds to make them more springy, more soft, more spongy. And for any bread, for that matter, a loaf of bread or whatever, that's a good step to do. It's unnecessary. You can get away without it, but it makes a nice difference. It's the difference between really soft bread and just kind of soft bread. So, anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Until next time, have fun in your garden, have fun in your kitchen. I'm gonna go eat the rest of this roll. If you want to help support the channel and everything I'm doing here, become a paid subscriber to my weekly column at maritimegardening.substack.com. It's $5 a month or $30 a year. It's all about gardening and a little bit about cooking, and I pump out a new article every Tuesday morning. And as a bonus for subscribing, every time I get 100 new paid subscribers, I will randomly choose one lucky winner to receive a $100 gift certificate at the online garden store of their choice. So maybe give one of those things a try. It'll help out a lot. Thanks and happy gardening.